Since it's Black History Month, I want to talk about something I rarely talk about, which is what it's actually like being a Black woman with albinism in America. This is not going to be a science or history lesson. This is lived in perspective of the world through my eyes. And this isn't just about me. If you've ever felt misunderstood, misread, or miscategorized, this episode is for you too. Because sometimes the hardest identity to carry is the one people think they already understand.
You've reached the Secret Society's Unfiltered AF hotline.
At the tone, please record your message.
Hey Size, it's your girl Secret Frison, and the line is now open. This sacred circle is for anyone choosing growth from within, and this is where we heal out loud and in color. Let me say this first. Albinism is usually talked about like a skin disease, a DNA mutation, or some kind of rare phenomenon that people only associate with exotic animals or documentaries. But for me, it's not just how I look. It shaped the way the world treated me before I ever spoke. Before people knew my personality, my voice, or my heart, they decided what I was. And when you grow up being defined before you're understood, that does something to your identity. People used to ask me, "What are you?" And I'd be genuinely confused because in my mind, the answer was obvious. I'm Black. Not kind of Black, not Black adjacent, and definitely not Black except for. I remember one moment so clearly when a kid at school had asked me that. What are you? Not who are you, but what are you? Like I was something to classify instead of someone to know. And I remember feeling confused and a little bit embarrassed, not because I didn't know who I was, but because I didn't understand why they didn't. Did all of the other kids see me as an it instead of a person? That's a strange feeling for a child, realizing other people see you as a question mark when you feel like a full sentence. But the way I look visually has made people question me my entire life. I've had strangers question my race. I've had people assume I was adopted or ask if my parents were really Black. I had people speak over me about my own identity and even try to place me in a category that made them comfortable instead of listening to what was true. And that creates a very specific kind of tension because you're no longer just navigating racism, you're navigating disbelief and often ignorance. As an example, growing up, I learned early that people stare, not glance, but stare. Sometimes in awe, sometimes in confusion, but always a little too long. The kind of stare where you can feel it before you see it, like neck turning, double take staring. Kids ask blunt questions and adults ask inappropriate ones. Some people are curious and some are ignorant. Some are cruel and some just know and move with a quiet respect. And you learn fast how to read a room for safety. You learn when to educate, when to ignore, when to laugh it off versus when to correct somebody, and when you're actually safe enough to just be yourself. That's mental and emotional labor that most people never see. I want to shift gears for a moment and talk about something folks don't always like to talk about, and that is colorism and visual bias, both inside and outside the Black community. Because when you don't look like people expect, they don't know where to place you. And when people can't categorize you, they often distance themselves from you. And this doesn't just happen in conversations, it shows up in media too. I've been seen as Too white for some spaces and too black for others, but definitely misunderstood in both. And really, that in between space can feel really lonely unless you build your identity from within instead of waiting for permission. Representation matters more than people realize because most portrayals of albinism in media are inaccurate. So, a part of my confidence journey was realizing I don't have to wait to see myself represented correctly. I can be representation. And I won't lie, there were seasons where that got in my head, where I wondered how people saw me before they heard me, where I felt like I had to prove belonging instead of just existing. And identity pressures can be heavy when you are carrying other people's expectations along with your own truth. There came a point in time where I stopped trying to make people comfortable with my existence. I stopped over explaining, stopped shrinking, stopped performing identity for acceptance, and I decided I know who I am whether you understand it or not. And that shift changed everything. My confidence didn't come from being seen correctly. It came from seeing myself clearly. Having albinism forced me to have a self-confidence that cannot be shaken, not because I think I'm better than anyone, but because I truly know who I am. I'm no longer trying to be understood by everyone anymore. Instead, I am committed to being aligned with myself. And alignment is quieter, stronger, and more peaceful than approval ever was. And to be clear, this didn't happen overnight. It came from years of being misunderstood, years of deciding that I'm no longer shrinking to make strangers comfortable anymore, because when you know who you are, confusion around you doesn't shake you the same way anymore. So if you've ever been mislabeled, misread, or forced into a box that simply doesn't fit, I want you to hear me. You do not owe anyone a simplified version of yourself just because they don't have the depth to understand you. Your identity is not up for debate. Black history is not one look, not one shade, and certainly not one story, and neither are you. I want you to take a second and ask yourself, where have you been over-explaining just to be accepted? Where have you been shrinking so that you can be categorized more easily? Your answer? That's your signal. That's where your identity is asking you to stand up straighter. Honor the fullness of who you are, even when people don't quite have the framework for it yet. Because sometimes your existence is education, whether you signed up to teach or not. If this episode spoke to you, please like it and share it with someone who is learning to stand in their identity without apology. And tell me in the comments, what was the moment you knew who you were? Sirens, until our next sacred circle, I want you to walk like you know who you are. Be you, be unshakable, and as always, be unfiltered AF.